Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. When the new Homeowner Association president Karen moved in last month, I knew we were going to have problems. She seemed friendly enough at first, always waving and saying hi, but it didn't take long for her inner Karen to emerge. The first incident happened about 2 weeks after she moved in. I was washing my car in the driveway on a sunny Saturday afternoon when I heard that shrill voice shouting from across the street. "Excuse me, you're not allowed to do that in your driveway. It's against the homeowner association rules." I looked up to see Karen glaring at me with her hands on her hips. "I'm sorry, what? I've lived here for years and have always washed my car in the driveway," I responded, confused. "Well, I'm the new homeowner association president and it's prohibited. The soap and water will run into the street and cause problems," she huffed. I tried to explain that I wasn't using soap, just hosing off the dirt, but she wouldn't listen. "Rules are rules. Take it to a car wash from now on," she scolded before marching back inside. I shook my head in disbelief. This was just the beginning of Karen's crusade to enforce her interpretation of every minor homeowner association rule. Over the next few weeks, she constantly harassed me and other neighbors over the most ridiculous infractions. My welcome mat was apparently half an inch too big. My trash cans were left out 5 minutes too long after pickup. My grass was a quarter inch too tall. No matter how politely I tried to address her concerns, she always resorted to threats and condescension. "If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to issue fines," became her favorite phrase. The final straw came when I returned from work one day to find an official homeowner association violation notice taped to my front door. She was fining me $100 because my mailbox post needed repainting. I saw red. This was just a tiny spot of chip paint. There was no way I was paying this ridiculous fine. Finally, having enough of her harassment, I decided to fight back. I reread the homeowner association bylaws to make sure I knew them inside and out. Then I started watching and waiting for Karen to slip up. It didn't take long. The very next week, I noticed her putting out her trash cans at 6 p.m. the night before pickup. Aha! The bylaws clearly stated cans could not be put out before 7 p.m. I took photos of her violation for evidence. The next day, I typed up an official notice citing the relevant bylaw. With a smile, I walked over and taped it to her front door. A taste of her own medicine? Well, she lost it when she found that notice. She came storming over to my house, face red with anger. "How dare you fine me? I'm the president," she shouted. I calmly explained that rules apply to everyone and quoted the exact bylaw she violated. "If you don't pay the fine, I'll have no choice but to escalate this," I said, throwing her own words back at her. She sputtered threats about getting lawyers involved before whirling around and leaving in a huff. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But I knew this was just the opening skirmish in what would likely be a long war over the homeowner association rules. I had to get the other neighbors on my side. I started talking to all the other homeowners she had been harassing with ridiculous fines over minor issues. It didn't take much to convince them to stand together against her craziness. We came up with a plan. Every time Karen violated a rule, one of us would report her and insist she pay the fine. United, we could fight back against her selective enforcement of the bylaws. For the next few weeks, Karen received constant citations for her hypocritical rule-breaking. She left holiday decorations up too long. She failed to submit an architectural request before repainting her shutters. Her grass exceeded the maximum height. Each time she argued and fought the fines, but we wouldn't back down, and each time we included her written citations as evidence. She had no defense against her own pedantic words. We could tell it was taking a toll on her. She became more and more agitated and reclusive. We also started a lobbying effort to prevent her from being re-elected at the next homeowner association meeting. It all came to a head one Saturday morning when I opened my door to get the newspaper. There was Karen tearing through my flower beds and bushes in a frenzy. I yelled at her to stop, but she ignored me. By the time the police arrived, she had destroyed thousands of dollars worth of landscaping. Of course, I pressed charges for the vandalism. The police also notified Karen that she would face a very steep fine from the homeowner association per the bylaws against destructive behavior. At her court date, the judge ordered her to pay for all the damages and take anger management classes. But the ultimate punishment was barring her from ever serving on an homeowner association board again. We celebrated her removal at the next homeowner association meeting and elected a new board focused on cooperation, not petty citations. No more Karen rule in our neighborhood. With our community united, we could finally relax and return to normal life without constant harassment over mailbox height and grass length. The new board concentrated on things that really mattered, like arranging neighborhood watch and a block party. As for Karen, we heard she had to sell her house just to pay the fines and lawsuit costs against her. I almost felt bad seeing the for sale sign go up. Almost. But I knew our neighborhood was better off without her brand of crazy. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire when dealing with an insane homeowner association president on a power trip. But in the end, the good neighbors will prevail over any entitled Karens trying to rule through intimidation. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Cast me, Karen co-parent, kid daughter. This story takes place a few years after our breakup and the settlement of our house. We have had 2 years of 50-50 custody of our daughter, 1 week on, 1 week off. Handover is on Monday after school. This is good, as I avoid seeing Karen most weeks. On one of my weeks, the kid comes down with a stomach flu on Thursday, both ends like a volcano. This carried through to Saturday, and on Sunday, she was tired but had no symptoms. I kept her home on Monday to ensure she is 48 hours symptom-free before sending her to school. I dropped the kid off at Karen's, informing her she had a stomach flu, but she should be fine for school tomorrow. Without asking any additional questions, she utters a sound I've only heard camels make before closing the door, rude. But anyway, 3 days go by, and I get a call from Karen. Karen, kid is lactose intolerant. You need to get special milk. Me, where is this coming from? Karen, she had ice cream last night and threw up 45 minutes later. I spoke to my hair and beauty teacher, who said she must be lactose intolerant. Now it's time to mention my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, is a qualified and practicing dietitian and is listening to this call as I put it on speaker. Wife, I really don't think so. Lactose intolerance mainly affects the bowels. Kid had gastro last week. The body will often reject dairy foods for 1-2 weeks post-gastro. If symptoms continue after 3 weeks, then it's something to look into. She went on to explain the science behind this, but I'll spare you the details. My wife said that she cannot make a formal diagnosis, as that requires specific costly tests, but she can refer and treat such conditions. She said it's her professional opinion, as these symptoms are sudden and presented around the same time as gastro. It's gastro-related dairy avoidance. Karen, you're not a doctor. Kid is lactose intolerant, and if you don't comply with the treatment, I'll report you to child protection. I thought for a second and said, okay, I'll make you a deal. You get the formal diagnosis and I'll fund the full cost of the test. If it comes back negative, I'm not paying a cent. Hearing this, my wife smiled. Karen, so I pay for the test, and when I get the diagnosis, you will pay me back the full amount. Me, yup, including flights and accommodation. Karen agreed to this deal. I texted her this for written evidence, and she replied with, okay. A few weeks go by and the kid tells me, Mummy is taking me to Melbourne for tests. I get to go on a plane, yay. It's a good time to note that week. The kid was having milk with her breakfast, and surprise, surprise, no problems. Another 4 weeks go by and Karen calls me. Karen, so the test results came back negative. The specialist said it was probably gastro-related issues. Nothing that we could have seen coming, but at least now we know. Anyway, the flights cost me $600. Accommodation was $150, tests were $750, so you owe me half, which is $900. Me, firstly, my wife, who treats conditions like this, said it was gastro-related. You refused to listen, stating we are not doctors, but apparently your hair and beauty teacher is a qualified doctor, eh? Secondly, $600, $150, $750 equals $1,500, half of which is $750, not $900, which brings me to my main point. We agreed that if the test was negative, I wasn't going to pay a cent. You agreed. I hung up, sent her a screenshot of our agreement, including her okay response. The next one is a petty revenge story. This was about 23 years ago. My husband was lousy at giving gifts. He would get what he wanted for himself. That year, I came home to a large box wrapped up about 10 days before Christmas, and he said it was for me. He was so excited. Mind you, we have always been pretty broke, so we, or should I say I, always bought for our children and his greedy family, Mill demands. We always did without. For some reason, I wasn't that excited about this gift. Intuition. Well, Christmas Eve comes and we open gifts. He gets all excited, telling me that I'm going to love this present. I open the box to find a shop vac. We had hardwood and linoleum, so I always swept and mopped and had no need for it. He told me that it is wonderful because it cleans up the garage, his domain, even picks up water, and he said it worked great because he already tried it before wrapping it up. I was pissed. He bought it for himself. I would have been happy with a $5 necklace that turned my neck green. That night, I wouldn't even go to bed with him. He comes into the living room where I was laying down at and told me to come to bed. I told him I wouldn't because I couldn't look at him. He then tells me how I was extremely selfish because gifts were to be what we as a family could use, not what we would want. I laid there all night and plotted my revenge. I had to wait for a year, but like they say, best served cold. I kept quiet and told nobody of my plan for revenge. 50 weeks later, I found it. I wasn't even looking for it, but it was staring right at me as to say, here I am, and it is time. It was in a huge box. I quickly purchased the gift, got some wrapping paper for it, and hid it. Didn't want any sneaky Pete's. Christmas Eve, while he was at work, I put the present under the tree, took 2 rolls of cheap wrapping paper, and I put some ribbon and a bow on it. It also had a nice weight for it. We start opening gifts, and I wait a bit. Finally, his eyes light up seeing this big box and finding out it was his. He was so excited, and I told him that this is specially bought for him. He opens the box to find a case of toilet paper. I then quoted him. Christmas was not for what we would want, but what we as a family need or could use. We all wipe. He was furious. He complained to his brothers and everyone. My family and his brothers told him that he deserved the toilet paper. To this day, no husband in my family will ever buy a vacuum cleaner for their wives as gifts. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Story from quite a few years ago from when I was a bartender in a corporate-style cookie-cutter restaurant. I mostly worked nights, but had one regular mid-shift on Fridays. We were always super busy at the bar for lunch on Fridays and usually had quite a few of the mall workers coming in to eat then head back to work. Nearly every Friday, the same smug, borderline rude lady came in for lunch. Every time she paid exact change, 0 tip. Maybe half the time she would complain over some minor inconvenience, and more than a few times got a comped meal. The more I had to wait on her, the more indignant and pissed off I got. So around Christmas time, I was out and about in the mall buying for family and friends. Picked out something nice for my girlfriend at the time, a sheer top, which I thought would look amazing on her. Decently priced with it being on sale too. Walking up to the cashier, I was a bit surprised to run into resting idiot face. Whatever. In street clothes, I felt like she barely registered who I was, or maybe she really didn't care who was at her register, maybe both. So I handed her a $20 bill. She examined it for a moment, turned it over twice, held it up to the light even. Then out came the counterfeit pen marker. Thinking to myself, a bit excessive, no? Change should have been around $1 and change. Surprisingly, she handed out $81 plus change. She called the next in line, so I stepped to the side for a moment in contemplation. I could honestly feel the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. Took me a moment or two, but I finally let my moral compass win and stepped back in front of the register. I nicely explained that there was a mistake made, but before I could continue, she shot me down and briskly told me, in a semi-professional tone, to GTFOH. So I did. The way I look at it, all those lost tips and the money she just gifted me was just karma. Sucked to be her, I guess. The next one is an entitled people story. So a few months ago, I had a bachelorette trip to Puerto Rico. 2 of my bridesmaids were able to go and my mother and sister came as well. I asked my mom to be the maid of honor since I thought it would help create a closer bond between us while getting ready for my wedding. My whole goal was to have everyone get along and just have a good time. I should have known this was going to be a disaster. A couple of weeks before, my mother started criticizing all of my bridesmaids/friends, with a particular focus on one who was actually going on the trip. I ended up paying for my mom, sister, and my own flight to help ease the burden on my mom, who would have had to pay for both her and my sister. The plan was for my mother to pay for her and my sister's hotel. My friend reached out to everyone to try and plan something for me without me getting involved. I would like to add that I planned the bachelorette trip as the bride. When my friend reached out to my mom and called her, She wanted to help as much as she could. My friend is actually Puerto Rican, so she was going to be a huge help with this trip. At the time, I did not know about this call. My mother called me at 3 a.m. after having that call with my friend that day to tell me she had not been fulfilling her maid of honor duties because she was observing everyone and everything. She then said, as the maid of honor, she should be planning the Bachelorette trip. I found this conversation odd, but I said okay. I was relieved that she finally stepped up to help me with the trip. My mom did say, before the call ended, not to tell my friend she talked to me about this, which I did find odd as well. The next day, my friend called me and told me that she wanted to make sure that I had a great Bachelorette trip to remember, and it should be all about me. She wanted to help me with the excursions I wanted to do, and I told her my mom wanted to plan as well so they could work together. I saw my mother the next day, and she went on a rant that my friend was disrespectful and said she was not letting a little girl control her on this trip. She made it seem like something was wrong with my friend and how she did not want to wear her stupid t-shirts during the trip. She started raging and telling me she didn't want to go in the rental car with my friend and wanted to take an Uber. Her words were, "Your friend is disrespectful, and I will beat this idiot ass." This automatically started stressing me out. She said she didn't like my friend and she was disrespectful and had mental issues. I ended up calling my friend and asking her if she could cancel the rental, but she said she could not. I created a group chat for the ones attending the trip, and my friend was asking questions about the activities we were going to do and how excited she was, but my mom and sister were instantly annoyed. My mom was supposed to plan the activities that we were going to do in Puerto Rico. She refused to let my friend do it or participate in helping, even though my friend is Puerto Rican. Fast forward to the first day of the Bachelorette trip. When we arrived, my mom's luggage was missing, and it had all of her toiletries. She was upset about it. When we got to the hotel, I let everyone rest since it was an early flight. My friend got there a little later in the day, and I met up with her and my other friend in the lobby. I called my mom and sister to meet us downstairs, so we could go with them to replace the toiletries that were lost and have dinner. As my two friends and I were waiting, my mom came downstairs and stood behind my Puerto Rican friend and said hi to her so quietly that she could not hear her. I hinted to her that my mom was standing over and behind her while she was sitting on the lobby couch, which I thought was weird. She turned around and said hello. My mom instantly just said, "Okay, I am leaving now. Go be with your friends." She literally ran off. My sister did not say a word. When I tell you the energy was so off, you could cut the tension in the air with a knife. I asked my friend what was going on with her and my mom because something just felt really off. She told me she did not really know her, so she did not understand why. I decided to just go to the bar with my friends and wait for my mom and sister to get back. 5 minutes later, I got a text from my mom saying, "Shame on you. You betrayed your family. You chose a nobody over your own family. I'm disappointed, and your sister and I are out of the wedding." I responded and said that I did not, and asked what the problem was. I was then ignored. I started crying hysterically because I did not want my bachelorette to be like this. My friends tried to cheer me up and took me out to dinner. I decided to let things cool off and try to smooth things over in the morning with my mom and sister. I went to my mom and sister's room and knocked on the door several times and kept going back to knock on the door. I also called each of them, and there was no answer. I even waited around the lobby to see if I ran into them, but nothing. I called both of them again later in the afternoon, and finally my sister picked up. I asked if they were okay and if we could squash whatever happened and move forward with the plans. I asked why they did not answer me for hours, and they said they were sleeping, which I knew was a lie because I heard someone look through the peephole when I knocked earlier. My sister said they are not doing any of the activities that I wanted to do and that they were having lunch, but would not tell me where they were. I felt terrible. My mom planned nothing that she said she was going to plan. My friend even texted and reached out to my mom and apologized for whatever my mom thought she did and called, but my mom did not answer. My friends scrambled and tried to make the best of the rest of the trip for me, while my mom and sister were MIA. The day before we had to leave and go home, my sister reached out to get their plane tickets, which I had purchased. I sent them, and I was immediately upset. My mom asked me to put my credit card down for her and my sister's hotel and said she would pay me back. I honestly think that she had no intention of paying me back because she is my mother. They ignored me during the entire trip and now demanded their plane tickets. I decided to change my flight and leave earlier. I couldn't sit on the plane with my mom and sister and act like this was normal. My sister called and asked if I was going to get an Uber to the airport, and I told her no, I have a different flight. My mom finally appeared and called me and said so many hurtful things. My mom told me I was always disloyal, how I interpreted everything wrong, I overthink, I don't care about her and my sister, how I was feeling is wrong, and called me a liar and hung up in my face. My friend started to tell me about the phone conversation that she had with my mom prior. She didn't want to tell me out of respect for my mother because my mom asked her not to tell me about the phone conversation. My friend said my mom was talking badly about me, my fiance's family, and how I was planning my wedding. My friend was put in this awkward position. Ever since that trip, I have not spoken to my mom or sister, and they did not show up to my wedding. I only get a text from my sister to tell me to pay both her and my mom's phone bill once a month, and that is it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.